Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new to this channel, my name is Greg and I am a celiac. In this video, I'm going to go through some of the most frequently asked questions I get asked in regards to having celiac disease. I'm not going to hang about, I'm going to get right into it. And my first question is, what food do you miss most? And to be honest with you, I think the food I miss most is something fresh from a bakery, like a pasty or a sandwich, and where the bread was baked in the morning and the sandwich is still a bit warm, or a baguette or something like that. Ultimately though, I think it's the convenience I miss more than anything else. It's the convenience of being able to walk into a bakery, not think too hard about it. You pick up a sandwich or a pasty, you eat it, you enjoy it, you go. When you're gluten-free, it is a little bit more harder because you've got to plan ahead a little bit more about, right, so I'm going to this place today. I haven't bought any lunch with me. Where will I be able to go to get some gluten-free food? And touching on that, actually, it's quite important because I think if I was to go somewhere at lunchtime, or I was to go for a nice drive to a beach or wherever I may be going, I almost always pack my own lunch. I save the hassle of having to go somewhere else to find gluten-free food and alternatives. I find it so much less stressful and so much more convenient. I make my sandwiches before I go. Happy days, no problems at all. And that's probably something I'd recommend for most gluten-free people actually at the moment. Question 2. What's the hardest thing about being gluten-free? In my opinion, it's not so much about cutting gluten and wheat out of your diet, but it's more about the social aspect, I think. I've done a few other videos on this channel about being gluten-free and what it's like to live with celiac disease, but I think the one thing I haven't touched on as much as I should have potentially is that social aspect. You're going out with a friend you haven't seen for a while and they might not know you're gluten-free, and you've got to explain, oh sorry, I can't eat this unfortunately. The mic's just fallen on the floor. There we go. But yeah, where was I? Yeah, so it's just like if you're meeting up with a friend or something who doesn't know you're gluten-free and you've got to kind of explain, oh sorry, I can't eat this. Which is perfectly fine. It's probably me just overthinking and over-worrying about it. But I did actually talk about this in my previous gluten-free video where I was comparing different gluten-free lagers. I think another thing is when you go to a cafe or a restaurant, a lot of these places now have the gluten-free alternatives. Or they may, if you're really lucky, have a separate gluten-free menu. Yes, maybe the gluten-free menu isn't as diverse as the normal regular menu, but the option is there. And for me personally, I'm just grateful to have a gluten-free alternative. I don't want to have any fuss. You know, if it's not wheat, I'll eat it. Question 3. How many years have you been gluten-free? In truth, I have been gluten-free now for nearly 10 years, actually, which is quite scary because it feels like yesterday I first found out I had celiac disease. But yeah, so yeah, about 10 years ago now, nearly a whole decade I've been on a gluten-free diet. So it's interesting, there I am talking about not liking the social aspect of being gluten-free. You would have thought after 10 years I would have gotten over that by now. Question 4. Can you eat some gluten as a treat? Now this is a particularly good question because I think when I first found out I had celiac disease, I did pick a little bit and I thought, well, you know, a biscuit here or there won't really hurt too much. But as time's gone on and the years have passed, it's got much, much, much worse. To the point now where I think if I did eat a biscuit, I would 100% be feeling it. Little things now actually get me, such as if there's a lot of soy sauce, for example, in Chinese or something, I often get ulcers on my tongue, which is an immune response. It's actually a symptom of celiac disease. It's quite uncomfortable, to be honest, and sometimes I'll eat a meal which might appear gluten-free, and then maybe an hour later I'm getting ulcers on my tongue and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, what was in that food that may have caused this? And almost always it's little things like soy sauce. So in answer to the original question, can you eat some gluten as a treat? I would say no. There is no denying being a celiac or having a wheat intolerance. It affects everyone differently. Every individual is different. For me, I wouldn't touch it anymore, but whereas 8 years ago, in truth, I probably would have had some gluten every now and then and risked it. But if you can avoid it, you really shouldn't have it, because I think it's just something to be careful of is the long-term effects of eating gluten. Your stomach really is struggling to digest it, and it can have long-term effects on your stomach and your intestines, and it's certainly something to sort of be aware of. And I would question, do you really need that little bit of gluten? But that said, I completely understand how hard it is to cut gluten out of your diet. Question 5. Is celiac disease curable? This is a great one. In truth, no, unfortunately not. There is no cure for being a celiac. I think it's important to remember with celiac disease, yes, it's not a very nice allergy to have, but it's not as bad as other allergies, like a nut allergy, for example. For most people, if you were to consume gluten when you have celiac disease, you may be sick, you could have diarrhea. It's very unlikely you're gonna have a life-threatening outcome. There are cases of where people have ended up in hospital because they've eaten gluten. So I think it's important to remember, if you are diagnosed with celiac disease, just remember it's not the end of the world and there are much worse things to have. And also, the variety of gluten-free products and alternatives out there, not just in supermarkets, but cafes and restaurants too are providing the alternative now. So it really, really isn't that bad. Question 6. Have you noticed you spend more money on gluten-free food? To be honest, yes, gluten-free food is more expensive. So naturally, of course, I would probably have spent more money than I would have if I was buying regular gluten products. Ultimately, the best and most effective way of making sure you're not spending too much money on gluten-free food is by cooking as much as possible at home. Yes, time constraints, life gets in the way, but the cheapest, most effective way of keeping costs down when you're a celiac is to have a lot of home-cooked food, because you know exactly what ingredients are going into each meal. Therefore, you're not spending too much money on lots of gluten-free products which are ready-made, which are more expensive. I tend to buy them more as a treat. I love a gluten-free pizza, for example. I keep a couple in the freezer, but I don't eat them all the time. I am quite aware of how much I'm spending and try to cook at home as much as possible. My last question, which isn't necessarily related to the gluten-free frequently asked questions, but it's more of a personal question which people do ask me about me and making these videos for my YouTube channel. Do you prefer making gluten-free videos or videos about history and history around Swansea and Gower? Because it's surprising how many people have asked me this question over the last year. I think ultimately I enjoy being outside and getting that information out there and telling untold stories and discovering mysteries and things about folklore. I love that. I think that's ultimately what I prefer doing. However, as I am a celiac who lost a lot of weight as a teenager, who didn't know what was going on, I think I have a platform here where it's important to share my experiences to help others who might be going through what I went through. That's all my questions that I have for now. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask me, please feel free to comment below. I'm always happy to help if you have some sort of concern or queries in regards to celiac disease. So yeah, feel free to comment and I will see you very, very soon. I've got new videos in the making all the time, so do feel free to subscribe if you'd like to. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.